It was more to do with the unconscious bias towards black players in terms of the positions that they felt you could command. So, and I remember even Ron Knowles, who was the chairman of Crystal Palace, doing an interview talking about that black players aren't built to play in certain positions. You know, you had to be a winger or a striker, you know, not positions of so-called responsibility, whereby you're a goalkeeper, defender, defensive midfield player, and a captain, because these were the misconceptions that they had of black players. But these are the misconceptions they had of black people generally anyway. So I don't know why we're looking at football even back then or now and thinking it is unique in terms of the discrimination on unconscious bias or conscious bias that they go through. So growing up, it was just what it was. You know, I didn't have anything to reference in terms of looking at to then equate it to something else, because this is the way society was. So I was no different as a black footballer to a black plumber or a black bus driver or a black person who hasn't got a job or a black doctor. But it was just the overt forms of racism which was accepted throughout society, not just in football, but on television and everywhere. So, you know, and I always like to look at it that way, because of course we do want to throw, you know, the kitchen sink at football and say how terrible football is, but this is the way society was and still is.
Sure. Interesting you brought up about that, about the position and the color and race and stuff. Harry Edwards, the sports sociologist, talked about the term stacking, and so, and how even as young players and stuff, individuals are starting out, they put, you know, would filter young black athletic and mainly boys, if we're talking about like American football and basketball, into certain positions. In football, you had the thinking positions, which was the quarterback, the center, and stuff. Where with the where you looked at the more athletic positions being filled
running
by
back,
the young black athletes. Yeah. And then you had that filtering, if you will, and stuff all the way up and stuff all the way through. And now we're looking at, like, for instance, in the United States, the NFL has, you know, 99.6%, if I remember correctly, of the safeties in, you know, that defensive position, that quick reflexes and stuff, are black players. Yeah. And stuff. So
but it's the same in football, because in football now we have black goalkeepers, black center backs, black captains, black defensive midfield players. But this was the unconscious bias towards their ability to think when you talk about positions of responsibility. And interestingly, although now in American football you have a lot of black quarterbacks,
starting to.
However, they're expected to be able to run, and the black quarterbacks now can run with the ball, whereas the white quarterbacks, you know, they're not the explosive ones who run. So even from that point of view, if you have a black quarterback, you expect him to be able to be a bit like a running back. So even those unconscious biases, although now we understand that the thinking position, the captain of the team, the quarterback can be black, but we expect a certain type from him rather than a Tom Brady type. So it still continues even to this day.
Exactly. And the challenge of some of those coaches also trying to mold that black quarterback into the mold of like a Tom Brady or someone as well, and stuff. They're saying, no, don't run as much, but okay, we need you to drop back and pass more and stuff. And that's not their game. And that role of the quarterback in that American football has evolved with the black quarterback and stuff. But sometimes even you might even see that some coaches are hesitant to allow that to flourish.
Well, what happens in American football is that if you look at American sport, particularly explosive sports like basketball and American football, the black kids growing up to play American football have been good athletes. And they may become quarterbacks, but they're good athletes. You have had white kids who haven't been athletically very good, but who are good quarterbacks, who were never athletic growing up, who were never expected to be athletic growing up. But you don't want to have many black kids who aren't athletic saying, I want to be an American footballer because I want to be a quarterback. Yeah. So from a white perspective, you've always had the non-athletic kids who can't run will say, I'm going to be a quarterback from a young age. And they develop that. If you are 8, 9, 10 as a young black kid and you're not athletic, you're not even thinking about American football rather than thinking about, yes, I could be a quarterback because I'm not athletic. So even these stereotypes affect even young kids in terms of the expectations.
Sure, exactly. No, that's great. You made your football league debut at a time when racism was quite prominent in England and English football at that and stuff, and as you described and stuff. And black players had only recently become a regular feature in the game. Can you describe your perceived level of acceptance maybe within the clubhouse, by coaches or by other players around the league? And then also, did that level of acceptance differ on the part of the fans as well?
Well, the level of acceptance, as with most sports, is determined on your ability. So, of course, because I got into the first team at 17 and I'm playing for England at 19, I was fully accepted. I saw black players who weren't as good as me, who weren't accepted. And as much as they weren't accepted because of their ability, that unconscious bias that you feel towards black people still to this day, but definitely back then, meant that you were less accepted than the white players who weren't very good. So that is why black players got criticized more harshly for not being good because of the unconscious bias towards black people generally anyway. So my acceptance was 100% wholehearted. That's not to say that in times of confrontation, that even the players who accepted me didn't make a racial comment, a racial slur. And even the fans, if I didn't play well, then that would be a feature. So yeah, but it was never an issue with me. Never an issue with me. And I'll tell you why, because I came from a middle-class Jamaican family whose family started the trade unions in Jamaica and very instrumental in setting up the first Jamaican government. So I'm a middle-class Jamaican who is fully empowered. My family are very educated. They went to university, doctors, lawyers, politicians. So I am fully empowered, a human being, when I came as a 13-year-old to England. So when I started playing football at 17 and racist abuse started being hurled down on me, I was looking behind me to see who these people were trying to disempower and disenfranchise, because they could not be talking about me, because I'm a fully formed, fully enfranchised human being. And for some idiot who can't even spell his own name to try and make me feel inferior because he's bringing it to my attention in whichever way he wants, racial abuse, that I'm black, how could I feel inferior? How could that upset me by some idiot shouting at me because of the way I've been brought up? Now, I'm saying that's right for me, so it never bothered me. Now, for other black players, and I always use Ian Wright as an example. Ian Wright coming from Southeast London, whereby his experiences of growing up with racism, from a family perspective, from a perspective growing up, being disenfranchised, even made to feel inferior, then, you know, he would react in a different way. Now, I could never advise the young boy how to react. You have to react what's right for you. Now, fortunately for me, the way that I reacted was the way you had to react back then. Because, of course, if you ever fought against it and started to swear and complain, the club will say, well, you're not strong enough to make it as a footballer. So a lot of players fought against their natural characteristic to speak out against it, although they wanted to, or get upset because they knew if they did, they wouldn't make it. For me, I didn't have to do that. And I'm not saying I'm right and they're wrong, or they're right and I'm wrong. You have to be who you are. So, as I said, it never bothered me at all. And even up to this day, when people go, it must have been terrible for you, and how hard it was for you, I said it wasn't hard at all. I never suffered from racism at all. I experienced racism, but I didn't suffer, because I could not let ignorant people affect me. And it wasn't something that I had to bite my lip and really struggle to do, and it was horrible, but I had to pretend. Because ignorant people, as far as I'm concerned, can't affect me. So, as I said, everybody's different. So I was never affected by racism. And secondly, what I always say is that I experienced racist incidents, not racism. A racist incident is on a Saturday when a banana comes on the field and someone racially abuses you. That's a racist incident. Saturday after the game, John Barnes, superstar, gets in his nice car, goes to a restaurant. I'm allowed into the restaurant. I go to the front of the queues. I'm let into the clubs. People buy me drinks. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Everybody loves me. So Saturday comes and there's a racist incident. Racism is what black people go through every single day when they wake up in the places they live, the jobs they have, the education their children get. Every single day, it negatively affects them. That's racism. That's what we have to challenge. But unfortunately, we're still challenging racist incidents and feeling if we can focus on racist incidents, George Floyd is a racist incident. And we think if we can stop racist incidents, we'll stop racism. It's the wrong way around. We have to stop racism first, then we'll stop racist incidents. So I experience white privilege. Because when I go to the front of the queue, and when I walk down the road and a woman doesn't touch her handbag, and I go into a shop and the security doesn't follow me, that's white privilege. And that's what we have to start to explain to people what white privilege is. Because when you say white privilege to certain people, they get very defensive, because you're assuming that you're saying they've got where they've got to, because they're white and they don't deserve it. And, you know, in terms of the money they make and the jobs they have. So that is not what I consider to be white privilege. White privilege for me is something that white people would consider normal. Walking down the street and no one looks at you if you're going to steal something. And white people won't see that as white privilege. They say, oh, that's just normal. But what's normal to white people is white privilege to some. And that is where Frank Lampard, to be topical, Frank Lampard has to understand. When Raheem Sterling spoke about Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard and Sol Campbell and someone to work in 4th Division, and Frank said what he has to understand, this is what Frank is saying to Raheem, you have to understand what I've been through, the badges I've been through and everything I've done to get where I am. It is not personal to Frank. It is not personal to Frank or Steven when he says that Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard have been given advantages. It happens to be them. It could have been 2 other white players, and Wayne Rooney at Derby, for example, or whoever comes through. So don't take it personally, because you will then get defensive, as Frank did, because he thinks you're having a go at me for being where I am. He's not. He's talking about people like you, it happens to be you, will be given an advantage over someone who's achieved the exact same amount as you have, who's black. So it's not personal. Similarly, when I was at Celtic, it's not personal to me that Celtic, as I said, fired me quicker than it would have been a white manager. It is not me. It is any black manager in any club has been fired quicker than any white manager. But of course, Celtic fans then took it personally to say that you're saying Celtic is racist. I'm saying, no, it's not. I'm saying it happened to be me, but if you look throughout any clubs, and that's a fact. And that's what we have to understand. Nothing is personal. The racism I get wasn't personal. The racism I got was towards black people generally, and because I happen to be that person, it came towards me, but I don't take it personally.
Oh, wow. Wow, it's very
powerful.
And so, as well. Raphael, did you have a question to pose at this time?
Thank you very much. It is really fascinating what we just heard, and I just wanted to share something. As a member of the Never Again Association, which is a Polish-based organization that has worked on the subject of racism in football, among other things, we have been inspired by and cooperated with groups that you know well, such as Show Racism, The Red Card, our good friends, Kick It Out, other British groups. And I would say the English example is very interesting on many different levels, not least because England invented football, but in some ways, England also invented racism. England also invented racism in football. And on top of all that, it invented anti-racism in football. So I think there are many interesting angles here. But my main question to you would be this: after all those years of campaigning on this issue of racism in football in England and elsewhere, we are still talking about the problem. So what do you think went wrong with those campaigns that haven't been able to eliminate the problem entirely?
Right. Well, first of all, the only way we're going to get rid of discrimination is by changing people's perceptions, not by passing laws. And that's what we've been doing, passing laws. It's been illegal to steal, kill, and rape and murder for thousands of years, but we're still doing it because a law cannot change that. A law cannot stop people being racist. You have to explain to people why it's wrong to be racist. That's the first thing. So you can't just pass laws. Now, why I say changing perceptions is the only way we can get rid of it is because you're from Poland. What is the perception of Polish people? When we talk about discrimination, racial or otherwise, what is our perception of women? What is our perception of gays? If you're going to go to war, would you rather go to war with a woman or a man? And as much as we will say it doesn't matter to us, the way we have been conditioned to think is that a man is better suited to go to war. A man is better suited to be a CEO of a Fortune 500. A gay is not suited to go to war, but a skinhead would be. This is the way we have been conditioned to think. And how have we been conditioned to think about black people? It's been in a very negative way. For the last 400 years, we've been conditioned to think that black people are intellectually and morally inferior. And that has been supplemented by scientists, geneticists, anthropologists, the greatest philosophers, who told this myth about black people to legitimize slavery and colonialism 300-400 years ago, and we continue to do that now. And we feel that we can stop it now by, when there's a football match on, the footballers to hold up a sign, say no to racism, and how we have been conditioned to think for the last 300 years, and we continue to see it, that's just going to disappear. No, it's not. We have to deconstruct what we've learned about Eastern Europeans, about blonde hair and blue eyes, about Muslims, about women, about gays, and it's going to be a very complex thing to do, which we're trying to make it very simple. Why I say that changing perceptions is the only way is because look at what goes on in society. Football is a reflection on society, not the other way around. And before you are a racially biased football fan, you're a racially biased member of society. But we're just saying it's football fans. So here's why changing perceptions is the most important thing. The biggest lynching one of the biggest lynchings, hanging people in American history, was in between 1850 and 1880, around that period, where 30 Italians were hung, lynched. Italians are white, but they were hung. Because the perception of the Italians then, the Southern Italians, was that they were inferior, morally and intellectually. So therefore, they hung them, and no one batted an eyelid, because the perception of them was that they were unworthy. They didn't pass any laws. They didn't have a positive discrimination. They didn't have any Rooney Rule. The perception of the Italians changed so that the Italians now in America aren't seen as second class. The Irish were the same. When the Irish came to England and went to America, you would see signs saying no blacks and no Irish. The perception of the Irish changed, which meant that there's no laws necessary to pass for you to stop discriminating against the Irish and the Italians. Now, from the abolition of slavery in 1807 to the abolition of the slave trade 1807, abolition of slavery, the Jim Crow, the civil rights movement, these are all laws passed to force people not to discriminate. But there are always ways around the laws. So as much as you can have positive discrimination, what we have to start doing is changing people's perceptions. But we're not doing that. All we're looking to do, like in Europe in football, let's pass a law to say it's illegal. And I'll tell you why laws don't work. Because now in Europe, you're not allowed to make monkey chants. Yeah? So that's the law. Fine. Now, when a black player gets the ball, can you boo? Is booing illegal? So when a black player gets the ball, the whole stadium can boo. Oh, right, let's stop booing. Let's ban booing. Okay, we'll clap. Let's ban clapping. Okay, we'll wave a white hanky. No matter what you do, there's always going to be a way for people to show you that they're racially discriminated against you. Why don't we try and change that person's mind who wants to boo, clap, or wait, change his mind as to why it's wrong to discriminate. And no one is doing that. All we're doing is talking about passing laws, positive discrimination, affirmative action, quotas. And just like the Italians and the Irish, whose the perception of them have now changed, which means that there is no law necessary for people not to discriminate against the Irish and the Italians because the perception of them have changed. Now, once you change your perception of a black person's moral and intellectual ability, you won't need laws for them to get jobs and for them to be treated as equal. But we're not doing that. We're still looking to feel that we have to just pass laws.
So more or less, sometimes we look at treating the symptoms rather than the disease itself.
Absolutely. You can't, listen, here's an example, COVID-19. The first thing you have to do with COVID-19, how did it start? Where did it come from? How does it spread? How is it maintained? Then you can come up with the solution. We're not doing that in racism. We're not worrying about the cause. We're not worrying about how it spread. We're not worrying about how it started. We're saying, let's just fix it. But until you see, and of course now we're looking at the situation whereby you're seeing in England now where we think the answer is to throw statues in the sea. But then if you realize how insidious the whole idea of racial hierarchy was, when you talk about Linnaeus, Blumenbach, David Hume, you talk about all of the greatest philosophers and geneticists who sold this myth of black moral and intellectual inferiority to justify colonialism and slavery, to exploit people. Because of course in the Enlightenment period, when man's individual rights came to the fore, 300-400 years ago, how can you enslave or treat somebody who looks like you in the same way? So you had to come up with this idea that there's a separateness of the races. There's only one race, the human race. When Darwin talked about birds and cats, and you're looking now to look at the separate taxonomy of different species. Yes, a lion is different to a tiger, different to a cat, and birds are different. But human beings aren't any different. And why does the gene that makes me black makes you, and the gene that makes you white means that we're separate races? It could easily have been the blue-eyed race, the gene that gives you blue eyes, the gene that gives you brown eyes. You're going to be separate races. So why was it decided on skin color? Why it was decided on skin color was because when you wanted to exploit people, you could not exploit people who look like you. So you had to create this myth that this person, from the biblical point of view, the Hermetic prophecy, or from the point of view of geneticists and scientists saying that these people are different to you, so therefore if you enslave them, that is what you're supposed to do because they're not fully human, then you justify that. And it's a very complex thing, but we're trying to simplify it by just saying, hold up a sign, say no to racism, we're all equal, And that's it.
Right.
I could just add quickly, I completely agree with everything you said, and I would just hope that more people, both in football and outside of football, have this perspective on the problem. But if I could just quickly ask a follow-up question, do you think that football, which is so commercialized today, or sports in general, can actually be a factor for change? Can it change society for the better?
Football can highlight the problem, and football with the players' platforms can bring the debate to the table. Football can't change it. I'll use Raheem Sterling as an example. Raheem Sterling is a fine young man. He supports Manchester City. If Raheem Sterling says no to racism, is there going to be any Liverpool, Man United, Arsenal, Chelsea fans listening to him? No, because they don't like Raheem Sterling. He plays for Manchester City. So a Manchester City fan, and a Manchester City fan who's racist, possibly, if he's racist, because Raheem Sterling says no to racism, is he all of a sudden going to have an epiphany and say, I'm not racist anymore? No, he's not. So that's 1% of people. The other 99% of people who agree with Raheem Sterling, they'll say, yes, Raheem, we agree with you, but you're not talking about us because we are not racially biased. And that's the problem. People have to understand that we are all biased to some degree, but people believe as long as I don't throw a banana on the field, and I don't racially abuse anybody, and I don't wear a Ku Klux Klan hat, I am not racially biased. So therefore, the problem is, and I'm not glad, but you know Amy Cooper, the woman Amy Cooper. Amy Cooper is the white woman in Central Park who called the police when the black man asked her to put her, I don't know if you heard about the case, put her dog on the lead. And she was on the phone and he was filming her saying, there's a black man in Central Park, I'm feeling threatened. Now, Amy Cooper would never consider herself to be racially biased. Never. And if that didn't happen, Amy Cooper, who's a white, liberal, Obama-supporting, Trump-hating, left-wing activist, would have on the front line of Black Lives Matter. But she showed that in times of confrontation, we then go to our default position of what have we been conditioned to think about the people confronting us. So what she's been conditioned to think unconsciously is this black man is inferior to me. Consciously, she would never think it. And we are all Amy Coopers. We believe that racists are these, burning cross people. We are all, and when you talk about discrimination, from a woman point of view, from a female point of view, sex point of view, homophobic point of view, we are all biased to a certain degree. And until we admit it within ourselves, instead of pointing the finger who gets caught, we'll never change. Look at us in England. George Floyd. We're now looking at America and saying how terrible it is. And what we're doing here in England is we're saying to people here, we're going to back the George Floyd situation. 3 black people were killed in police custody in England. No one batted an eyelid. Now it happens in America. English society is now getting on the bandwagon and saying, yes, we're going to support you. And what they're actually saying to black people is, look how terrible it is in America. Aren't you lucky that you're not there being killed? We have to be careful.
Absolutely. Those are very good insights. And I absolutely couldn't agree with you more on that. The European Football League, particularly the English Premier League, for instance, really lack leadership of color, of individuals of color, particularly in the highly visible role of manager. And what strategies should these leagues put in place that would increase the chances of not only their hiring, but sustaining them as well? And not just in the role of manager, but also let's look at higher up, executive positions. The league has grown tremendously. I believe more than doubled, I believe, in terms of the number of black players in the English Premier League, for instance, and stuff since 1992. But yet we're only seeing, what, 1, maybe 2 current managers, I think, at this point and stuff. I don't think Darren Moore is at West Bromwich anymore. And
no.
And stuff. And you mentioned this earlier about your stint and subsequent sacking. And
yeah. I think overall everything is going well.
But what do you feel is a way forward in this? How could you increase the hiring?
Too much. I think the feedback has been really good. Some
right.
more than others, and people.
I'm hearing something in the background. Is that somebody talking in the background?
I muted them. Don't worry.
We're fixed.
Okay. Right.
Thank you.
Just bear with me just give me 3 minutes on this. In the Magna Carta, I don't know if you know what the Magna Carta is, 1066, when England became England. You had barons and you had lords who lobbied the people to support them to get more power from the king, and then they'll help the people's life improve. That didn't happen. The French Revolution, the American Revolution, to help the poor man, give us more power, let us get away from England in the American Revolution, and that will help the poor people, and it didn't. There's no way that you can get an elite group of people being given power, and that's going to help the masses. And that's what we're doing now. We're saying we need black people in the boardroom, we need black people as managers, and that will help the situation with racism lower down. That's not going to happen. And I'll tell you why it won't happen. First of all, until we change our perception of a black black player from a sporting perspective, boxing, football, fine, we're equal in many respects. You know, 25% black players, and there isn't 25% black people in the country, means that we are overly represented, if you like. But sport is truth. No matter what you think about Usain Bolt, racially or otherwise, you're not going to beat him in 100 meters. You're not going to stop Raheem Sterling. Now, the next thing we have to overcome, which we've always had to overcome, is, are we intellectually and morally equal? Now, when you talk about a manager, that's when, do we believe that he has the mental capacity to lead? That's what we have to change. Now, that's not just in managers, because you go to the higher echelons of any industry, and you don't see black people represented in any high. So why is football any different? Why are we saying we need more black football managers? When you go to any Fortune 500 companies, go to any institutions in England, and there are no black people in leadership positions. And what we're doing is pointing the finger at football and absolving society of itself in terms of looking at itself to say, are we being fair? Are we being equal in society? But the more we just focus on football, we then pat ourselves on the back and saying, yes, we're doing something because we need more visible signs of representation in football. That is not what we have to do. We have to change the perception of the average black person, and then you'll see more black people being put in these positions. Because what can happen is a brilliant black person can get there. Obama, Beyonce, Frank Rijkaard won the Champions League, and then we elevate them out of blackness to then say, oh, we don't see them as being black because they're normal, they're fantastic. And then we convince ourselves that we believe in equality because we supported Frank Rijkaard and we both voted for Obama, much like Amy Cooper, just like Amy Cooper. So here's the situation. You have a situation whereby you can have the visible, which is important, don't get me wrong, visible signs of representation in the higher echelons to inspire young kids to say we can actually do that. Or we can create a platform down below in the inner cities for equality in terms of education, jobs, social care. Improve that to create a platform, and then the people there will be able to climb up the ladder themselves, rather than saying, help me to get up there and I'll pull you up, because there are many more people who can climb up than can be pulled up. So when I speak to a lot of the black elite leaders about this, they say, yes, we have to do both. We have to improve everything down below, but we also have to have the visible representations. Now, you know what that is like? That is like the Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter debate. All lives do matter. However, there's something which is more concerning and more urgent for us to deal with now, and that's the Black Lives Matter. So, do we need visible representations of people being presidents and football managers and actors getting Oscars? Yes. And we also need, in the inner cities, for the black community to be given better jobs, better housing, better education, better opportunities for them to actually rise themselves. So we need to do both. Which is more urgent? Just like the Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, which is more urgent? What's more urgent is dealing with the problems in the inner cities. And the biggest example of that, in terms of what you can actually do, which will make a tangible difference, is Marcus Rashford. What Marcus Rashford could have done, Marcus Rashford could have said, I'm going to give £100,000 to feed some kids for a week. But he didn't. He put pressure on the government and the councils to provide free school meals for everybody. And that's a tangible difference. So when I say to Raheem Sterling, he gave 250 Cup semi-final tickets last year. He's from an area called Stonebridge Park in North London, which is a bad knife crime area, black area where they've got low employment and bad housing. But he gave kids from the area 250 Cup final tickets, and everyone went fantastic. And it was fantastic. However, what I would have done, and what I said to him, I didn't say it to him personally, but when I give interviews, I said, he should have taken those 250 kids into a press conference and said, these kids aren't being given an education, opportunities, socially, economically, educationally, and that would help them. 250 Cup final, semi-final tickets means that for that day, they go to the semi-final, go back to their lives, nothing changes. Then next year, they can do that again. Just like what Marcus Rashford did in changing people's lives, that's what we have to do. So an elite person being in those positions is great, because you look at them and you say, yes, I can do that. So I can then become a doctor, I can become a lawyer, I can become a footballer. Okay, how am I going to become a doctor when I'm getting expelled from school when I'm 15? I can't even get a good education. social care, housing. So it's okay for you're brilliant, and despite you came from where I came from, you came through to make it. So you're saying to me now that 99% of us who are disenfranchised can also do that. No, we can't. Whereas if you create a platform down below for us to then get better education, better housing, we will be able to do that ourselves. So we're looking at people who came from the community, and despite their environment, they may have made it. And you will always have one or two people doing that. But wouldn't it be better to create an environment down below for more people to be able to do that?
Absolutely.
And football can't change that. Football can't change that. Footballers and actors, they can bring it to the fore. Bubba Watson can then say, you know, we want more Formula One drivers. Because don't forget, what percentage of the black population are going to be boxers, footballers, racing car drivers, or actors? Less than 5%. So what about the other 95%? What we're going to say to them? Because we have these visible signs of success. We don't need to do that. We need to think about the other 95% and help them.
Right. Often when we talk about that, we see that, you know, the young black individual, and sexually we see it here in the US and stuff, is that, oh, I want to be a basketball player. I want to be I want to play in the NFL and stuff like that. And that's great.
Want to be a rapper.
Yeah, there you go. And so, and that's okay to dream and to work towards it and stuff. But how many are saying, okay, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, I want to have this really good career, and then to know the numbers and to know the statistics, but also the pathway towards it. And quite often and stuff, though, that's not the case.
But look, this is where we're not going to be elite. So it's not as if you can't be a rapper or a footballer or a singer or a president, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a lawyer. 90% of them are just going to be bus drivers. They're going to be normal people, like normal white people. So regardless of what you think you're going to be, that's what we want. We want equality to be an average person. Because you can't say to all these black kids in inner cities, you have to be a footballer, a rapper, a doctor, a lawyer, because that's still only 5 or 10% of the black population. So the reality is that that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. But in terms of the equality we want it to be treated equally and given equal opportunities to become a man who works on the underground, or somebody who just works in a shop, to then sell this dream of you can all be doctors, lawyers. From a white perspective, you can't. This is the way the world is. Yeah? But we're saying to black people, that's what you have to aspire to be. And then if you don't become that, you then feel a failure. You then feel a failure. Not at all. We're trying to create an environment whereby it is equal opportunities for everybody. And if you have an equal opportunity, and the best you can do is to work on a bus, or to be working as somebody selling in a store in Oxford Street, that's what you have to do. Rather than saying we can all be doctors and lawyers and footballers and rappers. We can't. And that is not what this should be about. It should just be about giving an opportunity for you to maximize your potential. And if you create a better environment down below, socially, educationally, then the ones who are going to be doctors and lawyers, yes, the ones who aren't good enough to do that, then they will just become like an average member of society. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's what the majority of people are.
Right. Exactly. That's a great point. You mentioned before, we were talking a little bit about the managerial positions and stuff as well. And you were very, very clear on, you know, a pathway forward for that and stuff. And it's interesting because here, and just a good case of that is here in the US, the National Football League instituted that Rooney Rule, which would require the teams to interview minority candidates for coaching positions. But here we have a league that's 70% black. And right now, I believe at this writing, there's about 3 head coaches and stuff. So I think there's a good example there. It goes back to exactly what you're saying, that, you know, you can position yourself and do these, you know, enact these rules all you want and stuff, but look at these outcomes.
And you know why there's outcomes like that? Is because what the Rooney Rule does, the Rooney Rule says you have to interview candidates. So I'm going to interview a candidate. But if I don't have a belief in his ability intellectually, I can give him the interview because I have to, but he's not going to get the job. And then I can say, I've been through the process, I've interviewed him. And it is not a question of blaming institutions. You have to blame society, you have to blame people. Because to talk about football, my football particularly, any black football manager who's got a job, any job, is 100% backed by the fans. 100% backed by the fans. If everything goes well, they love you. When things don't go well, that is when, once again, default position, the unconscious conditioning of, can he be a good enough manager? So what I'm saying is, so what I say is that of course Celtic are right to sack me, because football managers are going to get sacked if you don't get results. But every black manager gets sacked quicker than white managers with the same results, because of the bias that they unconsciously, in terms of, did we really believe that in the first place, that he's able to do the job? Of course they trust you, they love you, and if you win every game, they're going to love you. But if you lose the same amount of matches as white managers who lose, not only will you be sacked quicker, you probably won't get another job. How many bad white managers have there been who's been sacked, none of the job, sacked, none of the job, sacked, none of the job? Now, this is the important point. It's about unconscious bias towards that particular group. Yes, from a racial point of view, from a female point of view, from a gay point of view. But here in England, what about white English managers? There is a bias against white English managers at the very highest level with the top clubs. Because if you look at Liverpool, Arsenal, Man United, Chelsea is different because Frank Lampard had that relationship, so he got the job. If he didn't have that relationship, he wouldn't have got the job. But when any of those jobs become available, is there going to be a white English manager? Eddie Howe, Sam Allardyce, David Moyes, British, Sean Dyche, who's going to get any of those top jobs? No, because the perception is that the foreign managers are better. So even from that point of view, it explains how unconscious bias towards, yes, it happens to be black, sometimes it could be women, but for white English managers, the negative perception of their abilities is that they're not really good enough. So we're going to get a foreign manager. And when we get foreign managers to manage our top clubs and they fail, no one bats an eyelid. No one says a word. But when you get a top English manager and he fails, people go, maybe the English managers aren't good enough. So it's something where a white man is being discriminated against, and you go, how can that be? And they'll all tell you that that's a fact, and it is a fact. So if that's a fact, and people understand that white English managers are being discriminated against, knowing the history of racial hierarchy, how can people not understand that from a black perspective, that happens? And even the press themselves, the question as to, can a black man be a good manager, is a racist question, and I'll tell you why. Any journalist who asks me that question, I'll say, by that, you're saying, the question, can a black ex-player, a black man, be a good manager? The question presupposes that there's a possibility that he may not be able to be a good manager because of the color of his skin. Now, is that a possibility? And if you say it's a possibility, you are racist. If you think that there's a possibility that a black man can't be a good manager because he's black and no other reason, and that's the question, then that is a racist question. And a lot of people, unfortunately, think that.
Sure. Rafael, can I have you chime in? Do you have a question? Oh, okay. No, that's great. We're gonna start in.
I just saw. Sorry a second. I just saw something come on the screen there because I think some questions come up. That's another interesting one. It just said on the bottom of the screen, West Indians are racially blah. I didn't see what it said, but it affects black people. I'm from Jamaica. What do we think about people from Trinidad or people from Barbados because of what we have been wrongly told about them? So discrimination affects us all. So we can't then say, what do Jamaicans think about, a lot of Jamaicans in Jamaica think about homosexuals? And what the narrative about that, because I like to talk about discrimination rather than just racism. You can't just separate it. You come from the same place, what we've been wrongly told about different groups of people. Now, what we say is that you can't blame us for being homophobic in the black community in Jamaica and some black communities around the world, because Christian fundamentalism was forced on us in slavery, and Christian fundamentalism says it's wrong to be gay. So therefore, you can't blame us for thinking that because that was forced on us. I say, yes, I agree with you, but then you can't blame white racists, because white racists were lied to and wrongly told that you were inferior. So how can you blame them for being racist? This is what they have learned. So just like you don't want people to blame you for being homophobic, you can't blame them for being racist because this is also what they have been told. So what we have to do is challenge the environment and the systems that have developed for us to think that, not the individual. I have no problem with any racist individual because he has been conditioned to think that way. Tackle the environment, like you said. Don't look at the cause, not the symptom. Yeah. Treat the cause. Don't treat the individual. Peter Bears and Liam Neeson. Treat the individual.
Sure, absolutely. Do we have, we can go into some other questions. Are there any questions for John Barnes? Norman.
Thank you. John, I have to confess that although I live in Australia, I'm a Manchester United tragic.
I can tell, I'm looking at your face. You look very sad after the other night.
Yeah. but I congratulate you on your 30 years ending of the drought. You've been very clear about what you think sort of, people in football can and can't do, but I'm just wondering, apart from the praise you gave to Marcus Rashford, Manchester United player, for pushing it, beyond the symbol into, can we do something practical?
Yeah.
Do you see a role for other players? They seem to be such cult heroes in popular, in the popular media, and they seem to be so adulated, generally speaking. Both the black stars, who, in my view, are more numerous than the white stars at the moment, but I don't want to make a distinction there, of course. But is there a role for footballers simply because they are so highly paid, and they're the equivalent of Hollywood in British society, I think?
Well, golfers are more highly paid. Tennis players are more highly paid. So why are we looking at footballers only? Racing drivers are more highly paid.
Not so many of
why.
them.
But I'll tell you, well, not really, because you go down to League One, League Two, and the Championship, and the lower division and the lower divisions who play for Norwich, they're not highly paid. We assume, because of Raheem Sterling and a handful of players, that all footballers get paid a lot of money. And of course, we're now throwing it at the door of football to make a change. But there are lots of other people who aren't taking the stand. Now, I understand. Football is media attentive. We've got a higher profile. So, yes. So, I agree with you to a certain extent that footballers have a responsibility. But what they can do is do what Marcus Rashford did. So, rather than say, we need more black managers, we need more black people in the boardroom, which is what we're saying, what they should be doing is what Marcus Rashford did. And what Marcus Rashford did was not a black and white thing. It's not a race thing. It's about underprivileged, disenfranchised, discriminated against communities who needed help. So if you want to talk about from a race point of view, I've mentioned Raheem Sterling, what they can do, because as I said, if Marcus Rashford gave £100,000 to pay for school dinners, the government wouldn't have needed to change its policy to do everything. And that's what we're asking footballers to do. Look to make a gesture to give some money to someone, or to say we need a black manager. If they use their power to then say, as with Raheem Sterling, here are 250 kids, whereby they're not being given a good education. You put pressure on the government and the councils, they would have to do something to change society. If you just do things by yourself, by saying, I'm going to donate this, I'm going to do this, it absolves the people who should be doing it of responsibility to do it. And that is what I'm saying to footballers. Use that power, not to say, because you know what's going to happen? We're going to have a black man in the boardroom. We're going to get a black manager. And then do we then say, fine, we're happy now because we've got a black manager, we've got a black man in the boardroom, Idris Elba got an Oscar. Is that going to change society? No, it's not. So I say use your voice to change it for the majority of people, not just for people like yourselves or for people who then want to get to these elite positions.
Excellent. Do we have another question? Rachel Quiggin.
Yeah, I put it in the chat, but how do we change these perceptions? Like, yes, you're talking about amazing examples who take their position and they make change at the bottom. How else do what are the little things that we do that change perceptions, that brings about that sustainable thing that's going to get rid of racism? How do we do it?
Well, as much as we're talking about,
going to solve it for us, but give us some starters.
Well, obviously we're looking at visible representations, and we think that that's going to inspire young kids who can't even, get a good education. So that's not going to change. When I say change perceptions, we also have to change perceptions of, if you're talking about from a white perspective, white society, change the perceptions of who you think you are. Because I'm talking about from an England perspective, our greatest hero, Winston Churchill. Because we think Winston Churchill won the war, altruistic, moral. Winston Churchill was a racist. Winston Churchill wanted in 1955 to have the slogan for the Conservative Party, keep England white. The atrocities he committed in Iraq, in South Africa, in the Boer War, in India where 3 million people got killed. So the history we have learned empowers a certain group of people to feel that they're superior to others. So that is why when they throw this statue of Colston and they say he was a racist because he had slave owners, sorry, he was a slave trader, and the whole of Britain, there are 46,000 Brits, 46,000 who got compensation up to 20 billion in today's money because they were slave owners. The whole of the fabric of the Western of Britain was built on colonialism and slavery. But we believe that it was only a few people who did it because we like to believe that we were moral and altruistic and we got rid of slavery and it was only a few people. So, but what do we think about communists? What do we think about of socialists? What do we think about black people? What do we think about Muslims? Now, we continue to see it every day. And how we change it is changing the narrative of who we think we are. I'm black, so it's different. But if you are white and you may feel superior because life has wrongly told you that you are superior to these people. Now how, and we all assume that this happened years ago, so how does it happen now? Do you remember are you in Australia? Okay. Do you remember the Australian man who went to New Zealand and killed those Muslims? Last year, 2 years ago. The Australian man who went to New Zealand and killed those Muslims. In England, in the newspaper, it had the headline, blonde hair, blue-eyed boy turns into killer. Now what that does, what that says is that we have to be shocked because why should a blonde hair, blue-eyed boy be a killer? How does that work on us subconsciously in thinking that if you got blonde hair and blue eyes, you shouldn't be a killer? And when I make that point to the people on the radio, this is last year, they said, no. He said, because, you know, it's similar when you had Jihadi John, who was who went from England, went to Iraq and became a terrorist. What they had on Jihadi John was the headline said, captain of the school football team, prefect, community member, turns into terrorist. And he equated that with blonde hair, blue eyed. And I said, because you're not even thinking about what you're saying. Jihadi John, all of the captain of the school football team, community member, prefect, they are attributes contributed to goodness. So when he becomes a terrorist, you're surprised. What attributes contributed to goodness is blonde hair and blue eyed. But this is how we think. We think if you got blonde hair and blue eyes, you shouldn't be a killer. And this is how we continue to view people. Jamaican yardis, Nigerian conmen, Muslim groomers. That gives you a negative perception of Nigerian, Jamaicans, and Muslims, as well as groomers and drug. But you never hear about Christian groomers, white drug dealers. So it works in our psyche every single day when we read the newspapers about terrorists. So how it works is that we ourselves assume that, when I say we, I'm talking about white society. I'm not white, but you know, white society assumes that because of what we have been told about ourselves is that we are superior. And every time we see something negative about Muslims, about blacks, that helps. That man who went into Las Vegas and killed 100 people from the hotel, he's not a terrorist. He's a lone wolf. But if a Libyan stabs 3 people as they're doing in England, that's a terrorist. So this is what we have to change, and it's continuing now. It's not just the way we've been conditioned to think 100 years ago, 50 years ago. It's happening now.
Wow. Thank you so much. And I'm just...
Is there a time for one last question?
Yes, there is. Go on, Jalal, or 2 or 3. I'm here all day.
John, this is Jaisal from Mumbai.
Hi.
Hi. I enjoyed hearing your views. One thing which I would like to ask you is, sometimes we do all agree that we can initiate change from the way we groom our children. It all begins at home. But one sometimes wonders whether concepts like skills, competency, do they really matter? Because in current situations, I've often seen that skill, competency, leadership, all these things take a backseat. What are your views on that?
Well, once again, no matter how competent you are and how skilled you are, if someone has a negative perception of you, then what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Because of course, you're in a country which is fairly divisive in terms of caste and perception of people. I'm from Jamaica. I'm light-skinned. What did we think about dark-skinned people with big lips? This is how we've been conditioned to think. And I'm sure in India it's similar in terms of, you know, the hierarchy of, even though the caste system may not be what it was 100 years ago. And this is an important thing. And it'll be quite topical to you. One of the greatest freedom fighters for equality was Mahatma Gandhi. Now, Gandhi was brought up in the temple in India. Sorry, the temple in London as a lawyer. So Gandhi knew that he was equal to any white man, intellectually and morally. So by that very same token, other Indians, never mind they could be the untouchables, but other Indians had the potential, in the right circumstances, to be equal to any white man, because he understood that. But he was brought up in a Western educated society, although he's fighting for Indians. When he went to South Africa, and he saw the way the Indian population were treated in South Africa, he was appalled. And you look at Gandhi's writings, who is a great man, a great leader, a great fighter for equality. Gandhi said, why are they treating Indians in the same way that they treat these black savages in South Africa? He was racially biased towards black people in South Africa because he knew that me and other Indians, because I know how great I am, but he was racially biased towards black people who he called savages and uncouth and unworthy because of how he has been conditioned to think about black people. So if someone as great as Gandhi, could still be racist towards black people because of his environment and the way he's been brought up, what chance has the average person got who has been conditioned to think from an educational, genetic, anthropological point of view? So it's not just about white people being racist towards black people. It is discrimination against the idea of blackness, which we all feel. In Africa, it's a black continent, black leaders, black prime ministers, black chairmen, yeah? When the football associations of the majority of African countries, who are fully black, fully empowered, when they're going to employ a coach, it's a white European coach. Why? Because they feel the white European coach is better. Why? Because of the way they've been conditioned to think. And this is what we have to change. Tackle the way we've been conditioned to think. Not just white people, everybody.
Excellent. We'll keep rolling if you want to stay for a little bit. Do we have any another question? And sorry if I can't see you. I'm just taking a look here, trying to scroll the screen, make sure I don't miss anybody.
Shall I talk until you have a question? Because I've got a couple of points to make.
No, that's okay. Go for it, John.
Right. I've been traveling around Africa for the last, I used to work in South Africa, and I travel around with Ethiopia, Congo, I've been all over. And we're at a very crucial point now at this moment from a black perspective, because when you speak to women in conflict in Africa, in some African countries, the Congo and places, Angola, where they've had women in conflict, and you speak to them about their experiences, they speak like this. The soldiers came and they killed my kids, they killed my husband, 20 of them raped me, and she's speaking completely desensitized, as if it's nothing. And you think, how could you speak like this after everything that's happened to you? You know why she speaks like that? Because when it was happening, she was shouting and screaming for help, and no one came, no one heard. So why shout and scream now? No one cared, no one came. That's in the Congo. Native American Indians, you speak to them about their experiences in the 1800s and early 1900s with their grandparents, and they'll say, well, the soldiers came to the village, they killed everybody, and they speak as if it's nothing. And because when it was happening, no one cared. Aborigines in Australia, a similar thing. So when you have people who have been disenfranchised for so long and the world doesn't care about them, what is the point in shouting and screaming and saying, come and help me, and it's a disgrace, and you shouldn't do this? Because when they were doing that, no one came to help. So, black people. I'm walking down the road in London, and a black man who's sweeping the street comes up to me, and he goes, Barnsey, you can't get a job as a manager. It's a disgrace. There's discrimination and Raheem Sterling, and it's terrible. And I'd say to him, and he's shouting and he's angry. And I say to him, what job have you got? What's happened to your kids? What school do they go to? Where do you live? What are your job prospects? And you know what he says? Well, that's just the way it is. Just like the woman in the Congo, the Native American, and the Aborigine. Because he's given up hope on himself, and he's given up hope on society helping him, so he vicariously wants to live through me by me getting a job as a manager, and by Idris Elba getting an Oscar. And I listen to people in the black community, and that is why people in the black community aren't shouting about, we want more jobs, we want more education. They're shouting because we want more black men in the boardroom, we want Barnes to get a job, and Idris Elba, because they've given up hope on themselves. And just like the women in the Congo, just like the American and the Native Americans, we have to do something about that, which means that the elite black people who still have a voice and a platform, I say to him, thank you very much. I know you want to march on down in streets to help me get a job, but I want to speak for you because you have given up hope and you want to live through me. So, and I think that the black elite should stop worrying about, I don't think if Idris Elba doesn't get an Oscar, I'm not talking about Idris Elba necessarily like Frank Lampard. I'm just talking about, so I'm not criticizing Idris or anybody, but I think they'll be okay. I think his life will be okay. My life will be okay if I don't become a manager. What's happening to the people in the inner cities with their lives, whereby they haven't got a voice, haven't got a platform, and that's what we should do. And then after we sort that situation out, it'll be much easier for many more people like them and like me to get into those positions.
I had one question that came up on the chat, and I'd like to pose it to you, and John. What is your best advice to well-meaning white people?
My best advice to well-meaning white people is to look at yourself. Well-meaning white people like to look at Amy Cooper, Derek Chauvin, and now, of course, what's the name of the man with his wife in the Navy, Scott Bethman, who got caught racially abusing them. Yeah, we're all Scott Bethmans, Derek Chauvins, and Amy Coopers, because well-meaning white people like to then look at that situation and then come down hard and support us and convince themselves that they aren't racially biased. And because I'm now showing this support, but if you ask them how they really feel, and I'm not talking about, they would never do what those three did. However, but they do really believe in equality. And that is why I'm not just talking about from a race point of view. I go back to the well-meaning white men who then says, if you're going to go to war, would you rather go to war with a man or a woman? And we know what the answer would be. But we don't say that. We go, it doesn't matter to me. Because what happens is, I say this to my friends all the time, and they go, it doesn't matter. It depends on who's best suited for the job. I go, yeah. Once you know who's best suited for the job, who's better trained, you may very well choose the woman. But what is your initial unconscious thought when you have to make a decision? Him or her? Now, when I'm driving a car and I start all my talks, I go to Oxford, Cambridge University's banks, and I start all my talks by saying, I want to make everybody feel comfortable. I am racially biased. And I'm a bit sexist because of what I've been wrongly shown about different groups of people. So I'm not blaming you and saying I'm perfect, because I understand that. And if I'm driving down the road and a woman comes in front and she cuts me up, my initial thought is that, what's that woman doing driving on the road? Typical woman driver. Now I could make an excuse and say, oh no, I'm not sexist. It's not because she's a woman, it's because, but if I own it and I admit it within myself, I can then say, I am wrong to think that. I can work about changing it within myself rather than pointing fingers. But people don't do that. And as I said, Amy Cooper, if that didn't happen to her in Central Park, she would have been on the front line of the Black Lives Matter, saying it's a disgrace what's happening to black people. So we are all Amy Coopers. And until, from a black perspective, why do we think about homosexuals? We have to embrace that and think about that. And I'll give you the one just last example. I don't know if you want to go now. I was in Big Brother. I was in Big Brother with a woman called Ann Whitaker, who's one of the first female politicians, and Boris Johnson's sister, Rachel Johnson. And it was the year of the woman. So I had this conversation with them. And because it was the year of the woman, I said to them, okay, Anne and Rachel, year of the woman, we want equality in politics. You know, women are being underrepresented and discriminated against in politics. I said, when all of a sudden, and I know this is not the way it works. When all of a sudden, you've got full equality. Women and men in Houses of Parliament. 50 women, 50 men. Joint prime ministers, one man, one woman, Chancellor of the Exchequer, Secretary of State. I know that's not how the way it works, but if it did, you got full equality. When you're there drinking champagne and you women are saying, finally, we've got equality, you're clinking your glasses. I said, will any one of you look around and you'll notice that there's not a black woman there? And then they went, yeah, we'd notice. I said, no, you wouldn't notice. When I bring it to your attention, you'd notice. But if I didn't bring it to your attention, you wouldn't think about it. And that's what I'm saying. Disenfranchised group have to empathize with each other, but we don't. Because I speak to a female football journalist came around here the other day, and female football journalists, we know are disenfranchised, underrepresented, and we had this conversation, and she said to me, why aren't black men managers? And I went, well, because there are only two reasons. Either we're not good enough, and is that a possibility? Either we're not good enough, which is an impossibility, but I said, the only two reasons are either we're not good enough, or we're discriminated against. And she then said, oh, but there could be a third possibility. I said, what's that? She goes, maybe a lot of black players just don't want to be managers. And I said to her, that's a possibility, just like women don't want to be sports reporters. And that's when she went, all right, I take your point. So she knows that women are disenfranchised, they're being discriminated against, but she won't accept that black people are discriminated against, and black people won't accept women are being discriminated against. And that's why I say, when I speak about discrimination, I talk about it across the board, because it's the perception we have of different people's abilities, which is the same for black, women, gays, any disenfranchised group.
Excellent. I think that's going to wrap us up, unless anyone has any final questions. We're so grateful that you're willing to stay on. I know a lot of people had to scoot to another session, but I think also some people have said, well, I'm sticking with this, and and I'll get to the other session a little bit late.
Is this Norman Bay saying, define your other? Did you read that? I don't know what that meant. I could only see bits and pieces coming up. I don't know if it's talking to me when it says define your other.
That was Norman.
No, just, yeah,
But what
okay.
other?
Can I comment to that? It's just exactly what you were saying, John, about the female journalists, you know, the different roles. I'm just saying for all of us, as soon as you see any group or any label as being different or other, then you are inclined to discriminate against them. You know, to be afraid of them, whatever the reason, whatever you internalize that causes you to say, oh, I want to keep them at a distance. It's because of saying somebody is different. They're other. They're not the same as me.
No, but Norman, it's not just about the other. It's about the perception of that particular person. So it's not just because you're other, you're scared of them. And I'll give you a typical example of that. Typical example is I went to up in Desi, in between Ethiopia and Somalia, and I was there in a same area where Bob Geldof had his Band-Aid thing, where he had lots of people. But this one was where there's a genocide going on there as well, and a lot of these young boys, young black boys, who are now survivors because their parents had been killed, and I'm there as John Barnes, Liverpool footballer. And because I've got 7 kids and I love kids and I'm running around hugging kids, when I'm in these villages of these young boys, these orphans, when I go up to them to play with them, they run away from me. You know why they run away from me? Because black men came and killed their parents. When a white man comes up to them, they don't run away from him because white people are good. So when you talk about the other, it's not so much a question of the other, is what the misconception we have of the other, because there's no way a white man, people who they're not going to be scared of a white man because he's bad. Because what society has told us, in Africa, when white people come, that's good. Because they're going to bring money, they're going to help us out. So I understand what you mean by the other, but it's more to do with the perception of the other. A woman's ability to lead, black man's ability to think. Yeah. So so it's not just we're all different, so therefore we scared of each other, we view our other differently. It's what we have been told about the other, and we've not been told anything negative about the white man, the white other, for 400 years. I'm
agreeing.
Unless you're a communist.
It's that we tell ourselves that somebody is other. That it's a perception that you.
But that other could be good.
Much better than me.
That other could be better than us. And what we've been told as black people for hundreds of years is that white other is superior to us, and that resonates with us.
That's a great explanation there. Great references. Anybody else would like to continue the conversation? Do you think athletes have more leverage now when speaking out against social issues and stuff? And I'm thinking about, for instance, here in the U.S. Recently, several. And for those that don't know, the collegiate system of athletics here, NCAA, as it's called, the National College Athletic Association, is a huge,
what time did you go home yesterday?
Huge multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, if you will, and stuff. And you have these athletes who are on scholarship and play in these programs at the universities and stuff, and some of the higher level programs and stuff that are very, very highly visible programs and bring in lots of money and notoriety and stuff, and coaches are paid millions of US dollars and stuff to coach. And you've got some players now that are really, I don't like to say finding their voice, but are really being more socially active and stuff, despite the fact that often they feared for their scholarship or their position and stuff. We just saw one player came out at Mississippi State University, a big program in what's arguably the largest athletic conference, the Southeastern Athletic, the SEC, and came out and said, I'm not playing football in a state or for a university that's going to have a state flag with the Confederate symbol in it. But not only did he speak up against that, then all these other coaches spoke out and actually, if I remember correctly, went to the State House or went to whatever to lobby for that flag to be changed. And it was all, and it was really at the doing or the initiating of that young Black football player in the college and stuff. And I'm just saying that, you know, when they see some of the repercussions for that, and of course we can certainly go back to Colin Kaepernick and the outcome of his protest and stuff as well. But do you feel athletes have a bit more leverage now, if that's the right word I'm looking for?
So taking that flag down, has that helped the inner city to get better jobs and housing? Because the flag's not there anymore. If he had said, keep your flag, and I've got a voice, but let's do something about the inner cities and the Black communities in Mississippi who are disenfranchised, that would be better. Because taking the flag down, we can then convince ourselves that we're doing something, but is that going to help people in Mississippi, the poor Black people getting a job because you haven't got the flag? That's meaningless. If you want to make tangible difference, do what what Marcus Rashford did.
Right.
That's why I'm saying, keep whatever status you want, keep whatever flag you want, but make a change now. Just by taking down the visible signs of oppression 200 years ago will make Black people feel good because the sign's not there anymore, but they still can't get a job. And they still can't get housing. And that's what we have to focus on. So when you have an elite group of people commandeering a movement, which is what's happening now sometimes with the Black Lives Matter, I'll use two instances in America. Me Too movement. And that's not race, but that's sex.
Right.
The Me Too movement was started by Tarana Burke 15 years ago, 10 years ago, about the sexual exploitation of young girls in the inner city. That is what the Me Too movement is. No one knows that. You know why? Because Hollywood actresses commandeered it and said, Me Too movement, so it's about Harvey Weinstein. It's about actors, singers who were sexually abused, an elite group of people. Now, the original message about the sexual exploitation of young girls in the inner city, that message is now gone. That's lost. Because that's not what the Me Too movement is. Colin Kaepernick taking a knee was about, it's come around now, 4 years later, about the injustices, police brutality. It then became about a multimillionaire American footballer's right to take a knee. What's he taking a knee for? We don't know. It's not important, but he has to be able to take a knee. The messages are being lost because he's been commandeered by an elite group of people for themselves. And that's the point I'm making. So now, that young boy, well done. There's no Confederate flag. Is that helping people in the inner cities in Mississippi? No, it's not. And that's what we have to use our voice for. So when you're asking me whether an elite group of people have a platform, have a voice, and they can make their voice heard, yes, they can, but do something that's going to make a tangible difference to what's happening in the inner cities for the majority of people.
Absolutely. That of course makes the most sense and stuff, though. You provide education, provide equal opportunities, provide...
We have to do both. We have to do both. Remember?
Oh, of course.
Yes. Once again, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. What's more important? So is it more important for the Confederate flag to be taken down or for kids to be given a good education and social housing in Mississippi? While people are going to say, we have to do both, we're not doing both. We're doing one. In fact, we are doing both. But you know who's doing the main thing? Good people in the inner city, working in the communities, working for councils, Black people who are trying to help their communities, who haven't got a voice, haven't got a platform. The other elite are trying to help themselves by saying, help me to become a manager, help me to get an Oscar, help me to do that.
Sure. Excellent. Is there any other, I did get a message that I think we have to wrap up. Is there any other questions, Rafael? Anything else to?
And Rachel Quiggin wrote, and disability. Maybe you would like to point out about it, because we have to be as inclusive as possible.
Yeah, so the US Open, what have I found out about the fact that the US Open had excluded wheelchair tennis players from the competition for this year, and also that the juniors and the mixed doubles weren't being played. And there was a lot of advocacy just on social media about it. And there was the discussion about, well, is that discrimination, or is it just, you know, the fact of the matter? And they made the choice based on finances. And to the US Open's credit, they acknowledged that after they had consultation with the players, they're now having an inclusive, they now are having specific wheelchair athletes. But it was really interesting to see as well, because it was more the people, there was outcry that it was discrimination against athletes with disability, and then other people saying, but there are other areas that are being excluded. And the thing that the wheelchair athletes said was that the difference is that the juniors and the people in mixed doubles still have the opportunity to play in one of the singles, or the men's singles, the men's doubles, each of the other ones. But the people with disabilities don't have an option for joining something else. So a lot of the things that you've said today about this change that needs to happen and this bias that we have, I just wanted to make sure that we're also just thinking about how this is also where we need to go about making disability and physical and mental and emotional differences to not have any impact on the opportunity that people have in life. Thanks.
Right. No, well done. But I want to make a point about that. It's a little bit like in England now, where you talk about the Liverpool ladies football team and the football teams, because there's lots of money in football. Yeah. Now, by supporting the women's team in terms of Liverpool and all the Premier League clubs, they lose money. They lose money. They don't make money, they lose money. Now, this is a business, like the US Open, it's a business. Yeah. So they have to then say, in terms of what we should be doing morally, yeah, but we are a business and we're losing money. And people who complain about that and saying that, well, it's discrimination because we should have women, we should have wheelchairs. I say just to use women's football as an example, it's different in America because women's football is huge. People want to support, people want to watch. In England, it's different. So for the people who then complain to say, well, the women, not getting paid the same as the men, or they're not being supported, I say to those people, you go to the stadiums and you watch the game and you support them, and then the sponsors will be there, they'll be paying money, that's going to happen, right? So with the US Open situation, they will lose money if they then altruistically say this is what we have to do. And for people who then complain that we want to be inclusive, you are the ones who are the problem. You go and support it. You go support it. Don't say they should do it and they're losing money and I think you should do it. Well, you go to the stadiums, you buy the memorabilia, you pay money to support it, you subscribe to it, and then they will do it. So it's not their responsibility to do it to lose money if you're a business. If it was a charity, I understand that. But you can't expect businesses to lose money because it's a moral question. And the people who then want to complain about that, who are not spending the money to support it, but complain that they're not being supported, they, for me, are the problem.
So you've got to take the business, you've got to take the difference of business out of the component so that it's not a decision that they'll ever have to make because it makes the same amount of money.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I say, so when I say, well, and they said the women should play at Anfield, the football team. I'd say yes. And you wanted to play at Anfield? When 40,000 of you go to Anfield to watch them and pay the same amount of money that you pay to go and watch the men. Yeah. You know, because of course, when you're running a business, yes, you have to try and they do. They support the women's team and they're promoting them. They take them with them. But you can't ask people to lose money because it's run as a business. And the people who are interested in really supporting it and saying that they should be paid the same, spend your money. Because look, Nike, whoever, Nike's not whatever they do. If you are going to go and buy Nike tennis rackets because a disabled player plays with Nike tennis rackets, Nike will pay that disabled player whatever they have to pay them, and they'll play in the Open. And that's what has to happen. So the people who are actually complaining a lot aren't the ones who are necessarily supporting it. They're the ones who are just highlighting the problem.
Sucks a bit that our world works that way, though.
Absolutely. So that's why I'm saying, look at ourselves. Don't look at the institutions who aren't doing it. Just to give you an example, there's a black radio presenter, and he got, I'm not going to give his name, but he works for a radio station here, and he lost his job because they said he wasn't connecting with the audience. A lot of people said, well, that radio station is terrible, and they should be more inclusive, they should employ him. I don't blame the radio station. I blame the people who he's not connecting with. Because if you wanted to listen to him, they would employ him. They're not racist. They want to make money. And if you're going to connect with him, they will employ him. So don't blame him for sacking them when you're not connecting with him.
Yeah.
That's why we have to look at ourselves rather than just blaming institutions.
Sure. Excellent point. I think that yeah, it is time to wrap us up. I keep on saying any final thoughts, and boy, we can just keep going. And so I don't think there is a.
I do talk too much. I know.
No. Oh, I can.
I'm actually writing a book. Funny enough, in fact, I've written the book. I'm now going to publish it. It's called The Uncomfortable Truth about Racism.
Oh,
because it's not about white on black. It's about how we all feel. So it'll be coming out soon. Watch out for it.
Oh, I'm definitely gonna contact you for a copy and that as well. That's excellent and stuff. We definitely look forward to that. And just that whole, that connection with sport has just really, I mean, it's always been there, and for a lot of different issues, but it just seems really to be has continued to take hold and stuff. And that's why I was really pleased to be able to see that we could factor sport in to the conversation here and stuff, though, and have a really good conversation around these important social issues, and even centered around, utilize sport as the catalyst and stuff for the conversation and stuff. It is very heartening and stuff, though, to be able to do so. And I was very pleased and stuff that you certainly led the way on this today. And
okay, no problem. Thank you very much.
Absolutely wonderful.
If I could just
you can hang back for a second.
Mm-hmm. If I could just very quickly thank John Barnes on behalf of the Never Again Association. I think we all agree it has been a really wonderful, inspiring discussion, and I think we all look forward to the book very impatiently now. And I also wanted to thank Dean for moderating. And I wanted to thank Eva for her support. And last but not least, I also wanted to say big thanks to Show Racism the Red Card for also helping us to prepare this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, folks.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I wanted to convey our sincere thanks on behalf of the Rotary International Peace Fellows and everyone who's put in a lot to make this global cyber conference go forward. It's the feedback so far has been just absolutely wonderful, and I know the chat lit up, and I got private messages here and stuff though as well, and stuff that were coming through, and it was tough trying to read them, and sorry I couldn't get to them all and everything and stuff as they were going and stuff. And it just so shows how special this conversation is and has been and can be, and stuff though, even through the medium of sport as well and stuff, and its connections as well. But certainly also the Red Card organization and stuff though, and Stop the Racism and stuff, Red Card program, and Ged and his ability and stuff though to help connect us and everything and stuff that was very special and stuff though to be able to do that, and it happened quickly, and I'm just very grateful that you were available and that you were willing and stuff though.
No, not at all.
And then just on top of that, it just was fireworks. It was absolutely wonderful and spectacular.
Okay.
As well. If you can hang back for 1 minute and stuff though, I'd appreciate it. And stuff.
If it's going to be 1 minute, because your 1 minute turns into 15, as I've come to realize. So I can hang back for 1 minute.
Yeah, I generally do speak in real time. I say it'll take 2 minutes. No, really, it will be 2 minutes.
I think you must be Jamaican. When he said 2 minutes, that means 15.
And as well.
Can I ask a very, very quick question of John?
Yes.
John, are you available to talk to a Rotary Club, an individual Rotary Club, if we were to ask you?
Of course. You sound like you're in South Africa. Where are you?
I'm in London. I grew up in South Africa.
Where in South Africa?
Cape Town.
Cape Town? Camps Bay?
No, Constantia.
Bay?
Constantia.
Constantia. I went to the wine region there. Beautiful wine up there, yeah.
Beautiful.
Yes, but I will be.
Wonderful. How do we get in touch with you?
You can get my email from Who's got my email there? One of you have my email. There's so many people on this group. Who's got my email?
I do.
Can you put it in the chat, Dean? Is that possible?
I'll send it to
Don't
you.
put it in the chat because it'll go to everybody in the world and everybody's going to
I'll
email.
send it to you privately.
I'm sure you can have a direct conversation or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay,
absolutely.
thank you, John. I appreciate it. That would be wonderful.
You're welcome.
Absolutely. No. I guard it very, clutch it, hold on to it and stuff.
You can give it to a few people, not to everybody.
No,
Well,
it's
Norman
okay.
just said me too. Give it to Norman.
No, it's okay. It's all good. No, that's great. But you know, thank you so much and everything and stuff. And Ava, you can.
I'm waiting for everyone because I have been recording. So yeah.
Okay, so you can stop
Cut it off. Okay, thanks very much, all. I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, John.
Bye bye. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.